In a relatively desolate southern arm of the galaxy, one can find the rather inconspicuous Sol system. Almost solitary, it was easily overlooked by the Mahawked Kings as they plunged the galaxy into war after bloody war. This was fortunate for the denizens of Yord, that small blue planet nestled in the third orbit of Sol, for it's unlikely that the simian race of humans that made their home there would have bowed down and accepted the Mahawked as rulers, given man's rebellious and independent nature. Had the gene sorcerers discovered mankind, it's quite likely a planetary genocide would have ensued. But Yord was thankfully overlooked, and mankind was able to develop independent of the greater galactic drama unfolding around them. But mankind was not satisfied to let the galaxy overlook them. Despite a veritable paradise at home, they ceaselessly looked to the stars, intent on one day dwelling among them. And their chance came with the discovery of mass drive technology. Now armed with hyperspace travel, humans began to leave Yord to explore the waiting heavens, a practice which many humans continue to this day. This exploration quickly brought mankind in contact with many of the different powers of the galaxy, and helped propel the newly formed Federation of Sol into becoming a great power itself. And as the Federation grew, it began to encroach on the territories of other growing empires. Before long, conflict over territory around Quan sparked an interstellar war between the fledgling human empire and the neighboring barony of Letnev. This war would long be remembered by the humans, leading to a widespread and enduring prejudice against the Letnev throughout Federation society. And as this war with the Federation and the Letnev raged, the Lazax, having long ago conquered nearly all the galaxy, drew near to barony space, intent on its conquest. The Letnev were no fools. Seeing the Imperial Armada arrayed against them, the Baron quickly submitted to Lazax sovereignty. All conflict with the Federation was ceased. The humans, believing they had won their war, rejoiced. That is until the Lazax fleets arrived over Quan. Now facing the choice only recently offered to the Letnev, Sol quickly followed suit, accepting the benevolent rule of the Lazax. Mankind was the last of the great races to do so, formally accepting their terms of annexation on the temperate world of Quan. Thus, it would be ironic that Sol would be the first to openly declare war against the failing empire, with the first shots being fired over the world on which the Federation now surrendered. In the millennia following Sol's annexation, humankind found vassalship to the Lazax an uncomfortable coupling at best. And this was no less true during the Age of Dusk, as the Empire began to fall. Though Sol was not alone among the great races to begin serious armament and large-scale mobilization, it was among the most aggressive and blatant in violating imposed militarization limits. The Quan conflict and the Mandu edict that followed were but sparks that lit the tinder of Sol's rebellious predisposition. And when the Federation's High Minister declared Sol's independence from the Imperium, he was greeted with universal support and jubilation by almost every Yord state and Sol outsystem colony. And thus began the Twilight Wars. The Lazax, their empire too bloated and divided to truly respond to the rebellion, remained complacent. This first war was thus fought primarily between Sol and the now also independent barony of Letnev, with an unfortunate extra kingdom caught up in the middle. The early advantage went to the Letnev, who pushed deep into both Sol and extra space, seizing system after system. But after nearly a decade of fighting, A stunning defeat of the barony's largest fleet over the Grawl system quickly reversed the war's momentum, with Sol now on the offensive. And before long, the Federation fleet arrived over Letnev positions entrenched on Archon Tau and began their bombardment. The struggle for this planet lasted 2 long years and left that extra homeworld nothing more than a noxious rock, a fate soon to be shared by Mechatol Rex itself. While the Federation may have lost Archon Tau to the native extra, the reversal of Letnev fortunes was still a great victory. With the barony defeated for a time, the Federation began to worry instead about the Lazax. At first, the consequences from the Lazax for cessation were nearly non-existent, but the Federation knew Sol's obstinacy would not go unpunished forever. Already, Lazax war fleets were making headway into Federation space. Eventually, the inbred behemoth that was the Lazax Empire would bare its teeth, and even a fully mobilized Sol Federation could not hope to stand against the roused wrath of the Empire. And so, a daring plan was devised, one which aimed to break the back of the Lazax and draw other discontented races into the Federation's struggle. Admiral Steen Grayson, before a full assembly of the Federation High Command, suggested the unthinkable. A direct, surprise strike against Mechatol Rex, an act which would cripple the Empire's leadership and force the hand of the other great races. Using advanced mass drive technology, secreted to them by the headmasters of Jolnar, the Sol Federation's 3rd Expeditionary Force, consisting of more than 700 warships, furtively entered the Gull system and commenced their historic attack on Mechatol Rex. Within hours, the Lazax Emperor was dead, the Imperial administration in disarray, and the Twilight Wars truly begun. These wars continued for centuries, but no race was powerful enough to seize the throne. Slowly, the strength of the great civilizations began to fail, as their economies crumbled and as knowledge and technology were lost in the destruction and strain of long war. Sol was no different. For them, as for the other galactic powers, the Twilight Wars ended in a slow whisper. The time that followed, now known as the Dark Years, was a period of economic, cultural, and intellectual collapse for all. But at long last, a time for rebuilding arrived, as the Dark Years finally retreated into distant memory. The Federation, ever expansionist, began to seize its old colonies again, beginning with Emilpar and followed by Centauri, Grawl, Herculor, and Tiamat. However, they were not alone in their ambition. The L1Z1X minenet, now emerging on the galactic stage, sparked the custodial wars with an attack on the Sol colony of Emilpar. Within days, Sol forces were engaged on 3 fronts. The L1 were pushing their advantage towards Yord, with fierce fighting over Tiamat near the core. In response, the Federation had sent the H-Fleet through the Beta wormhole on Quan to prevent the L1 from doing the same and surrounding their forces. As a result of Federation mobilization near Quan, however, the Letnev responded in kind and began to seize Federation borderlands. As a result, Sol was forced into an uneasy alliance with the Extra and the Nazroka, allowing them to solidify their position and withstand the Minenet and Letnev attacks. This position was further solidified as the Minenet came in contact with a resurgent necrovirus on the 3rd moon of Kal Hadar, which forced the Minenet to sue for peace. Further, a Nazroka surprise attack at Tirana forced Letnev fleets to withdraw from Federation space at about the same time, allowing Sol to retake the planets seized by the barony. As war with the necrovirus became more and more inevitable, the Sol Federation found itself in a prime position to lead the charge. But all that changed in the aftermath of the Creus expedition. With Ixth now floating free in the center of the galaxy, dangerously close to Federation space, mankind was forced to withdraw from their positions beyond the Beta wormhole in order to fortify its own space. After all, while they were overlooked by the Mahact before, that was unlikely to happen again.